going to do today, for the most part, is talk about what burlesque can learn from comics and what comics can learn from burlesque. My guest today is Eerie Rottica, who I've met. Where did we meet? Either through Substack or Blue Sky, wasn't it?
It was Instagram before you deleted it.
It was Instagram. That's right. Because Eerie is also a comic creator. The new book comes out this August. It's called Crown of Bones.
Yes.
And it is about burlesque performers saving the world. Tell us about it.
Okay. So the Crown of Bones is about 6 benevolent monster queens who are in charge of the pieces of the Crown of Bones, and they need to put it together to defeat an ancient evil. So it will be portrayed by burlesque performers on stage, and there's plenty of nods to burlesque in the book with pasties and well, you'll have to read it to see, but. Uh, but it's separated enough where it's not the characters in the book are not necessarily burlesque performers.
Yeah. So I gotta know this because I had this great experience. I don't know whether you're familiar with Coheed and Cambria. But they do an album, and then the album feeds into a comic, and then the comic launches the next album, and there's kind of like a storyline or certain narrative threads that wind all the way throughout. Is that going to be similar to what you're doing, or are they both kind of uh, complementary just as one unit?
Oh no, I think it will be pretty similar. The show is going to follow the same storyline as the book, and we're lucky that we have this stage that is actually a movie theater. So we're going to project images from the book up on
Oh,
the stage behind the performers while during the show.
that's fantastic. This is going to be great, and this is August. This is late August. I know it's
Yes,
either the week.
August 23rd.
Yes, up in Syracuse.
Yep.
All right, fantastic. So, what we're going to talk about today is the more. So, Erie reached out, had a couple questions about comics. We started talking, and the more we were talking back and forth, the more I think we both realized that there's a lot of similarities between burlesque performance and comics. More than we gave it credit for, I think, because then I saw you started doing videos that talked about this and you're making these amazing points about how comics and burlesque intertwine. So we're going to talk about just a few things that came up. The first one we've got up here is build up and reveal. Let's talk about how you see that intersecting with comics.
Sure. So in one of my videos I said it's boring if you just spill it all out.
Yeah,
If like here's the story, blah. You have to have some kind of tension to build up to make the payoff worth it. And the
yeah.
same thing goes for burlesque. Um, so I brought a pair of gloves to give an example. Here's my example. If I just take off this glove,
Yeah,
no build up.
nothing. That did
Oh,
nothing for me over here. I don't know about those at home. But that did nothing.
okay, so example number 2, let's do some build up. And it's like first, it's like the setup for a joke. I'm showing,
Yeah.
then we're like, oh, what's under here? Oh, I've never really cared about forearms before, but now, ooh.
Yeah, that's
So,
amazing. And all of a sudden you're right because I know you had the complete attention of everybody watching. They were like, "What's she gonna do next?" That's exactly like the concept of tension and release, particularly for humor artists. So people that are doing humor have to pay very careful attention to tension and release. I told you, I hope I get my own joke right, but years ago, I wrote this Greystone Inn strip where I had a character meeting an exotic dancer for the first time. And he was kind of like, the happy, clueless character, that kind of trope. And he says, he says, "What do you do for a living?" She says, "Oh, I'm a dancer." And he says, "Oh, I went to a dance performance once." He goes, "But I really wasn't into it and I fell right asleep." She says, "Well, I'm not that kind of a dancer. I'm an exotic dancer." He says, "What does that mean?" She says, Well, it means I take my clothes off when I dance. He says, how does anybody get any sleep? That was like tension and release. And also a great example of something that we're going to talk about coming up, which is misdirection, right? Where I make you think that he's kind of disgusted about the fact that he fell asleep in this performance. Really, he was kind of like okay with it. And when she mentions the part of her dancing that puts the exotic in exotic dancing, his answer is completely unexpected. Tell me about how you use misdirection on stage.
So usually on stage for misdirection, what I need to do is make the audience look one direction so they don't see my next reveal. So
Yeah.
um especially for like taking off a bra, I love for that to be like, whoa, when did you do that? Suddenly it's gone.
Uh
So if
huh.
doing some people often look where your eyes look, and I'm sure you do this with drawing characters. If the character's eyes are looking here,
Yeah.
the audience looks there. So if I'm doing something like that and unhooking the bra, and then a moment later it just drops. Um, it's like magic because you didn't see me really like taking it off. It just
Yeah.
drops. You're like, how did she do that? Well, it's because I had you looking over here just by my eyes looking here.
Right. There's something it's a story I've never heard you tell. How did you get into this in the first place? What was that thing that made you, that drew you to this kind of performance?
Oh well, so there was a troupe here in Syracuse that I'm still part of, called Salt City Burlesque.
Yeah.
I attended a show, so that's all it took. I attended one show, and I said, oh well, I'm this is for me. I've got to do this. So I emailed them that night, and the rest is history.
Really? What was it like the first time you got on stage?
Oh man. So the first time I got on stage, I started as a stage kitten, actually.
Uh-huh.
So stage kitten is the one who comes between the acts and picks up the stripper droppings.
Oh, I didn't know
Oh,
that that was a thing.
yeah,
And it's called Stage Kitten?
stage kitten. Yep, like a little cat. So um I started that way and I'm glad I did. So I learned all the foundations of the show before just performing.
Yeah.
Um so what I would do is after the performers take off all of their clothes. Someone had to go clear up the stage and pick it up, but also make that theatrical and entertaining for the audience. So you kind of play with the audience and crawl around while you're picking up the stockings or whatever's on the ground.
Yeah.
Um, so I started like that, and then when I finally did my first act, I was still stage kittening the show also. So I ran off stage. I like did my bow and I ran off stage. And then I came back out and I said, well, now I got to clean up my act.
And that was the intro to your first performance?
Yep.
That's amazing. What was the audio? What was the reaction to when you dropped that line? What was the audience reaction like?
Oh, people loved it. And I love getting a laugh.
Yeah.
So I'll do anything to get a laugh. And that's actually something else I wanted to talk with you about because in burlesque, I get immediate audience feedback.
Ugh,
So it's
I'm
right.
jealous.
And I've been known to like refuse to take more off until they cheer more. Like, I'm going like this, and then like, hello, cheers, um, and they also get a kick out of that.
Yeah.
But it absolutely shapes the performance, and you get that immediate feedback. Whereas your comic, you don't really get to be there to hear them laugh.
No, and that's if they're laughing. Sometimes they're not laughing. But yeah, and that's something that I'm incredibly jealous about because it really is. There's a huge disconnect between a cartoonist and their audience. And so of course, you get a certain amount of comments and stuff from people, especially your hardcore fans that are really into what you're doing. You hear from them a little bit more often, but no, it's very difficult, and as a result, like I don't have that give and take between my audience the way you do, and the only way that I'll ever know if I was funny is if I have enough time that I completely forget the punchline. that I wrote, and usually that's about 5 to 10 years. In fact, on Blue Sky, I post regularly this date in Evil Ink, and I'll go back and I'll pull something from the archive. And the one that I posted earlier this week, where the kid said that he didn't get first place in the science fair, they gave it to this other kid. Why'd they give it to the other kid? He says, "Well, because Jared's got two dads." The guy goes, "What was his science fair project?" Kid goes, "Cloning."
I loved that
That
one.
laid me out. I sat there laughing at my own joke like an idiot, and I'm like, okay, I on that day I was funny. That day I really hit it. But no, I don't. We don't get that quite as much, and I don't know whether it's good or bad, to be honest with you. I don't know whether sometimes I think there are good parts about having a disconnected audience, because I don't get the negative parts as much, and also I'm not tempted to change the story based on what they want or what they expect, right? I don't like if they're guessing the storyline. I don't get that kind of temptation to change the storyline just to confuse that one person. Uh, but no, in general, I'm super jealous because we don't get that at all. And do you find have you had a bad experience with that, where you didn't get the reaction that you were hoping for and it completely threw you?
Yeah, there's definitely been audiences that are more quiet than my liking, where it's like they're just sitting there
Yeah.
blank, and I'm like, I can't tell if you're enjoying this or uh,
Blink
that are
twice
more,
if you need help.
yeah. Some acts are just more like mesmerizing rather than something to like really like scream about the whole time. So I just tell myself they're enjoying it. The audience wants to love you. They want to. Like you have to
Yeah.
give them that benefit of the doubt that they want to love you, and maybe they're just enjoying it in silence, so you just kind of like be your own cheerleader in there.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. That's something that I think cartoonists need to hear. Your audience wants to love you. That's actually one of those. I around my studio, I have little post-it notes in different places with phrases like that I need reminding of. I think I'm going to add that to my collection. Your audience wants to love you, which is a really kind of positive thought. I can tell why you're good at this. Let's talk about stage direction, because in comics, we very much use the fact that you read from left to right as part of our staging. If somebody's running, 9 chances out of 10, if you want to make him look running fast, he's got to be running from left to right. If he is running the opposite of that, if they're running left to right, or right to left rather, it almost slows them down. It's a good way to draw somebody running into a headwind, right? Is to draw them running to the left of the page instead of running towards the right of the page. How do you use that in choreography? Do you use similar things to that whole concept?
Sort of. So I had a Substack article about this where people read left to right and it feels like progress to be moving left
Yeah,
to right. But also um I'm moving all around the stage. I go left and right and backwards and forwards, and sometimes the audience is like 360 all around me, so I'm in a circle.
yeah.
So it's always different. But more specifically, I think of my if my body is a comic page, they're reading the Z.
Oh, really? Tell me
Hmm.
how that works.
So with angles and poses and stuff, if I wanted to put an arm out here and kick a leg out that way, it's pleasing to the eye, and it's like a composition. The composition of like they're going where their eye will travel, follow the Z. So like for poses, for moments of stillness on stage, you can
Yeah.
kind of read me like a comic page.
Wow. I would have never thought of that. So, talk about facial expressions, because that's one thing that, particularly in comics, you can really sell a line of dialogue, and add a level of complexity to a line by an eyebrow twitch, by a quirked lip, even something I've been getting into an awful lot in my own work is tilting the head. In other words, somebody who's talking and they kind of just give that little head tilt. Talk about how that gets used on stage.
Sure. So one thing that I do a lot is it's kind of breaking the fourth wall, because I'll do I'll do something ridiculous and then I'll make this face like "Believe that? Uh,
Is
get
there
a
a,
load of that.
yeah,
Um,
and there's not, there doesn't seem to be as much of a stigma on breaking the fourth wall as there might be in comics. Am I reading that right?
oh, absolutely. It's constant.
Yeah.
I'm constantly breaking the fourth wall. But so I do that, kind of be like, get a load of that. Can you believe I did that? But also if something, surprising, you do like a big cheesecake, um, or something's hot, I kind of do kind of like you would for like hot soup. Like it's so hot, you got to blow on it. Like,
Yeah.
um, so that's a super fun one. I'm pulling faces all the time, and it has to be big and expressive like theater. And I feel like comics have to be big and expressive like theater too. And and gestures and like you said, a tilt of a head. Like it's
Yeah.
small, but it's impactful, especially in a comic because it's still, whereas on stage I'm animated,
Right.
but the stillness of a comic, even a slight like head tilt is going to be impactful.
Yeah. I do a NSFW version of my comic called Evil Ink After Dark, and of course it's fully NSFW, and we've got a certain amount of crossover between what we do in that as well. Obviously, with the nude aspect of your performance, my question is, do you ever get recognized in public, and how does that go? Because every now and again somebody will come up to me and say, "Oh, you're Brad Geiger," and I'm like, "Yeah, well, I better be, I'm wearing his underwear." And they say, "I'm a Patreon backer." And then that's always a different kind of relationship now that we have, because it's a very different kind of comic. Do you get recognized in public, and if so, how do you handle that kind of intimacy aspect of the performance?
That's a really great question. So I have been recognized, and usually it's very warmly. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I'll like my like stage name versus government name is like the worst kept secret in town, so everyone knows me. So I'm it doesn't really matter, but people will call me the wrong name at the wrong time. I've had things where like I was at work, like at my day job, and people recognized me from my burlesque, and I'm like, eek, like is that trouble? Or it's like, or I'm like, well, I can't be in trouble because you were obviously there too,
Yeah,
you know?
you were looking. I can't
Yeah,
believe I haven't
exactly.
thought of this. Where do these costumes come from? Are you creating that? You don't go down to Spirit Halloween to get your costume, but where do they talk about costuming?
Yeah. So actually, this is even right here on my list. So I'm really glad Scott brought this up. So it's something that you always say for comics that writing is crucial. This is kind of only answering his question a little, but the writing is crucial. So I wrote here 100,000 rhinestones on a corset doesn't make it a good act. So
That sounds like another post-it note for my studio.
because like I do make all my costumes. I'll buy bases, so I'm not like sewing corsets from scratch, but I'm
Right.
doing a lot of painting and rhinestoning work. I make pasties, I make headdresses. So the costumes come from my mind. And but it can't start with a costume. It has to start with a concept. The
Yeah.
same way that you wouldn't draw an awesome character and then make a whole comic around them. You have to start with the story, start with
Yeah.
the substance of the writing there. So I have to start with the idea. So I wanted to do a Valentine's Day act,
Yeah.
and the song was love, like where they spell out love is
Oh, the Nat King Cole
yeah.
class. L is for the times. Beep, 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 beep. Yeah.
But I knew I wanted it to be comedy, but also Valentine's Day. So it was like, what do you do when you're really in love and it's red and it's love? I'm like, okay, period sex. So my costume
That's
is like,
fantastic. I was not expecting that.
so it's bloody tampons. So my whole costume is bloody, and it starts in this like gorgeous, red and white and silks, and they're, it's very elegant. And then it changes, and then you realize that everything is a motif to tampons. And I pull out giant, like they're like this big, just made out of like cotton batting and some stuff. And I
Yeah.
start throwing those around, and the crowd goes wild. It's hilarious. Uh, but
That's
it had to
amazing.
start as the idea and then turn into the costume.
Yeah. That's fantastic. That's really inventive. Now, that was one thing that you were asking a couple of weeks ago, because are you planning to do a comic convention, or are there's going to be a sales aspect of presenting this comic at the burlesque performance? Because you were asking about booth barnacles and how to handle awkward interactions between comics fans and comics artists. Is that something that you're concerned about?
Yeah. Um, so I have done a couple conventions already, even though we don't have the book. So I don't know what I'm doing. I just I go and hang out with my buds, and I'm at the booth and like talking about the upcoming book.
Yeah,
But I'm used to burlesque shows where I can escape to backstage. And I
right.
was thinking about your advice to for booth barnacles, kind of like shake and like push them.
Yeah.
Brad, you don't understand. If my hand touches a man, he's gonna fall in love and he'll never let
You're right. You're right. I've never had that problem.
go. I just touch on the shoulder, even if it's like a push away, he's
Yeah.
gonna say, "A girl touched me."
Oh my God. I'm so glad you said that, because that's something we should probably bring up on the show, because we've done the Booth Barnacle bit on Comic Lab a few times. And you're right, from the aspect of somebody who is a woman touching a man, for example,
Oh yeah.
that gets read completely different.
Oh yeah, especially for with not safe for work stuff. So
Yeah.
whether it's burlesque or a woman who makes not safe for work comics, if
Yeah.
don't touch, like any kind of physical contact could be not seen as a gesture to leave, but it'll make them stay.
Oh, yeah. Stay and stay and stay. Then you've got the next level of a Booth Barnacle. You got somebody who's not going to go away for the rest of the show. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I had never thought of that. So, what were so having been through that, did you come up with any strategies of your own for handling that?
So not really, but I haven't been alone at a booth. So there's always other people around, and
Yeah.
I can kind of still escape that way. There is going to be a vending aspect to my show. I'm calling it a mini con. There's going to be like 7 vendors before
Wow.
the show, and there's going to obviously be our book, but then some other like local comics creators. There's a crochet artist who is making the characters from my book, like the bad guys from my book. She's going to have little crochet stuffed animals of them.
Really? Oh, that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Oh, I met her from one of my previous shows. So the past couple years, when it wasn't the Crown of Bones release party, it was Trek Wars. So that
Uh
burlesque tribute to Star Wars and Star Trek. And
huh.
it alternated. So every act would be a Star Trek, and then a Star Wars, and a Star Trek, and a Star Wars. And I've organized that for 2 years. But I'm starting to get a little nervous that Disney is going to come for me and tell
Yeah.
me to stop doing that. So that was one of the many reasons why I decided to like let's try something else, and decided to do the comic book.
Yeah, and in a way, kind of. Although I'm sure you weren't familiar with Dave and I preaching this for years on Comic Lab, but you started to do something where you own and control your own work, right? Because these are your characters. It's something you don't have to worry about a cease and desist from a major corporation, right?
Right. Um, but one thing though that I didn't actually start listening to Comic Lab until like a year in to my comic. Um, which I don't know how I didn't because I listen to podcasts all the time. So what I ended up doing was just searching comic on Spotify
Yep.
and came up. But one thing that I bit of advice that I didn't hear until it was far too late was to make the likeness of characters based off.
Yeah, how are you gonna because that's some advice that we've given in the past is never use people that you know, don't use likenesses. There's an obvious kind of asterisk you put there for autobio comics, but even autobio, I'm not as familiar with that because I haven't done autobio comics quite as much. There was an autobio aspect to Fables, but I even then, like if I before I put somebody in the comic, I had their permission to do so first, right? Uh, Talk about that for a little bit. Do you think that's going to be a problem as this comic goes on? What are some of the pitfalls that you see that might be ahead?
Well, I hope it's not a problem, but based on the advice that I've heard you give, it's I said stay tuned for my eventual downfall. Uh, but the reason I think that we're okay is that it's contracted performers. Like they know that they're in this book and it's their job is to portray the character on stage. So I feel like the professionalism there changes rather than just like putting your friends and family in.
Well, yeah. So the next question is, what came first, the character or the performer?
The performers. So I did cast the show before we got to character design. So
Uh huh.
that um, the characters are drawn to the likeness of the performer,
Right. Right.
but
Right.
not intensely. Here, I'm gonna grab a thing here. This is not the best example because this is actually just our eyeshadow palette. But
Uh
here is like that is the character Stonia. She's a
huh.
Gorgon, and
Hmm.
she's based on burlesque performer Miss Lola Amore, and she doesn't have a snake for hair.
Right.
Um, I don't know, but it's not so much to her likeness that anyone would just know it.
Yeah. Tell me, if I wanted to get a copy of this book, do I have to wait until August, or are there places I can buy it now?
Oh, yeah, I wish I had somewhere to direct people right now, but you'd have to wait until at least August because I have to get my Kickstarter backers it first.
Right. If this goes well, will there be a book two?
Oh yeah, I've already written book 2. Like that's happened. Whether it goes well or not, I imagine at the end of the burlesque show I'll say book 2 coming soon. I already have all of your email addresses.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. You could do like a Marvel Comics closing credits scene where you come back out and do one little snippet, and then they always say, Black Panther will return in, blah 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 part two. You could do your own closing credits scene.
I like that. I like that a
Yeah.
lot.
Tell me, when you did Star Wars and Star Trek, going back to that performance,
Mhm.
what was the standout? What brings the most heat? First of all, between Star Trek and Star Wars, which fans were more energetic about the thing that you were doing?
So we had a pretty good mix of of audience members for each one. I think that there was more Star Wars fans there,
Uh huh.
but I think it's undeniable that Star Trek is sexier. Like it just kind of forgive the word, it oozes
Oozes
sexy.
sexuality.
Yeah, Star Trek is more sexy, but Star Wars is more popular.
Interesting, interesting. So because as you were answering that, I was trying to stay like one step ahead of you, and I was trying to think of what the standout spicy performances for each would be, and of course, Princess the the bikini Princess Leia, who was chained to Jabba the Hutt, was the first image that comes to mind for Star Wars. And for Star Trek, honestly, the first one that came to mind was Seven of Nine, played by Jerry Ryan. Was I close? Were those scenes that factored into your performance?
Oh yeah, people went crazy for 7 of 9. I didn't
Yes.
know they liked her that much, but they went crazy for her. Uh, I did so you let me tell you what I did for the Star
Yes.
Wars. I wanted to be Tauntaun Guts.
I love it.
And so the people are like, "Oh, so you're gonna be a Tauntaun or you're gonna be Luke?" I'm like, "No, I wanna be the white stringy guts in a Tauntaun."
Oh my God, this is
So
amazing.
so
I love the way your mind thinks. And how did you pull that off?
oh man, it was hard. Actually, I have some video up. I think I have it on Blue Sky, also on TikTok, some video. I made like a big Tauntaun costume, and
Uh-huh.
I have my arms straight up in it, so the head is just my hands, so it can be extra tall. And then it's the
Yeah.
sound of a Tauntaun dying, and
Yeah.
out with all the white stringy stuff, and Hot Blooded starts to play.
Oh my God. Hot-blooded.
Hmm.
How long did it come how long did it take you to come up with that? That's the perfect song. Chicken and egg. Did the song come first and Tauntaun come second, or were you looking through songs until you found Hot-blooded?
Oh no, Tauntaun definitely came first, and then it came time to think of songs, and
Yeah.
I actually went on Discord with my Crown of Bones creative team and asked them for ideas too. Be like, guys, what song should I do for a tauntaun from I'm the, you know, stay warm. I asked the host gave my intro of like I thought Eerie smelled bad on the outside. He's like I can't believe she's making me read this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So talk to me about the collaborative creative process, because you said you wanted to go into the Discord. I tend to be a little bit more solitary when I'm writing. Every now and again, Dave and I will try to write something together for the Comic Lab Pro Tips show, but mainly like I am a hermit. I get in my studio, I lock the door, I sit in the far corner of the room. Uh, I'm very solitary. And it always interests me to hear somebody like yourself that gravitates maybe a little bit towards a collaborative creative process. Is this something that you do often in terms of bringing ideas into a group?
Oh yeah, I feel like I can take ideas that other people throw in and put my own twist, or it might trigger a new thought to me. The same way that like what I'm talking about with burlesque has ignited some new ideas in you that you didn't think of before. It's kind of like that same kind of thought where it's
Yeah.
not necessarily asking people to like give me ideas, but it might spark a conversation and get things rolling. I love collaboration. I love working with people. Um, there's definitely some aspects to my art that I want to be just mine, and I will have that like hermity kind of protectiveness over it, where like this part's mine, but
Yes.
definitely relinquish some control over things when it comes to like a whole burlesque production.
You did a show once where you were a gelatinous cube. That must have been a Dungeons and Dragons theme idea. How did you pull? I keep saying, how did you pull that off? And I realize that's maybe not the right thing to say to a burlesque performer. But
Pulled off 1 minute.
how did you engineer that?
So actually, a fun story about the gelatinous cube is that I came up with the idea that I wanted to do a gelatinous cube act, and I didn't want to like look around to see what shows were around that I could submit that for. So that's when I decided I had to produce the show. If I wanted it, I had to produce it.
Yeah.
So I produced a whole Dungeons and Dragons show, and we did a digital and a live version for that one. And for those, I hire all kinds of different people, and sometimes they don't understand why I'm casting them. I had someone who had a mouse act,
Uh huh.
and he didn't get why he was in this show, but I needed it so that we could we start in a tavern, and then there's mice in the basement. So we kind of go on like the hero's journey as like as if the crowd is a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. But the first rendition of my gelatinous cube was made out of wood, and it was
Really?
very, very heavy, and it wouldn't fit through the door. And I was lucky that the venue had like a garage door opener, so I was able to get it through that way. And then
Yeah.
I was standing there waiting for the host to do my introduction, and it's so heavy, and I'm wearing a corset, so I can't really bend over much, and I'm shake under the weight of it all, and I'm like, oh my god, hurry up. So after that didn't work, we remade it out of PVC pipe
Yeah.
and fabric that's sewn together to just kind of pull over like a pillowcase.
Hmm.
I can't see through it though. I can only see down, so I can see my feet, but I can't see through the gelatinous
Oh,
cube.
really? So you've got to really be careful. That's something that takes an awful lot of practice, I would imagine, because I could see myself just walking right off the stage and falling off, right?
Oh, oh yeah, that's why I just keep looking down. But if I do fall off, I make it intentional. I twist it as like that was the joke. That
Right.
was
I meant for that to happen.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Or
How?
again, like gesture if you make a face like, can you believe that? It's like
Yeah.
clear you didn't mean it to happen, but you win them over by how charming.
I would imagine not for nothing. Uh, Once you get done with a burlesque style performance, you probably feel like you can take on the world, right? Because you've been completely exposed. There's absolutely nothing between you and the audience, and you've got them eaten out of your hand by the end of it. I would imagine that's very empowering is an overused word, but I imagine that you feel very powerful at the end of a performance.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what we call it, a glitter high.
Glitter high. That's amazing.
Glitter high. So you can have a glitter high for even a couple days after the show, and that's when I'm feeling most creative and productive. The days leading up to the show, especially if I'm producing, I'm thinking I'm never doing this again. But
Yeah.
then but then as soon as it's over, I'm like, okay, when's the next one? Am I
It's funny. It's the actual opposite of a Kickstarter hangover, right? Where going up to the Kickstarter, it's amazing, and then you wake up the day after, and it's like, I promised these people what? That's amazing. A glitter high. That's fantastic.
but then comes the glitter crash.
Oh my
So
God.
that's
What does one do for a glitter crash?
I don't know. I'm still learning that part. It's like a big weekend with lots of shows, everything's sparkly and great, and then it's like Monday afternoon and it's all over and you're just glitter crash.
Oh
So you have
man. Yeah, you've got to go into work and you're just not in, and it's the worst Monday ever.
yep, when you come and then you have to chase the next glitter high.
Yeah. Yeah, you start working on the next show. So you've done a Dungeons and Dragons show, you've done Star Trek, Star Wars, you're currently doing your own intellectual property with Crown of Bones. So far, which one do you think has been the most enthusiastic? Which one got the biggest roar, the biggest round of applause when you finished your act?
Hmm. So I've done the Star Trek and Star Wars we've done twice now. And my first year I did Padme, and people went crazy for the Padme act, and
Yeah,
I still have been doing it. I feel like I am doing it maybe 5 times a year. It's getting booked different parts of the state, and I'm kind of tired of it. I want to retire that act. I'm sick
yeah.
of doing Padme. But people love it. People love that one.
So not so in addition to being a burlesque producer, you'll be a performer for someone else's production, and they'll hire you. In other words, they'll like, oh, I heard about this person. They do this amazing Padme, and then you get hired based on that.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
amazing.
So I
This
have
there's so much about this that I just had no idea existed. You know what I mean? So you'd be other burlesque performers, or does it go beyond burlesque?
So I have my whole portfolio of performances, and producers anywhere can book me. So hey everyone in the comments, if you're a producer, you can book me. Um, but then people also will they could also just book me and say, hey, we're doing this show based on fill in the blank. If you don't have an act for that, can you create a new one for it?
Yeah, yeah.
And really, I can whip something together with my bag of tricks.
When it comes to burlesque, somebody is a first timer, just gets on stage, and I would imagine that you can tell very quickly this person's going to make it or this person's going to be one and done. What is the X factor that leads to you saying, oh, this person's going to go on and do a lot of burlesque?
I guess it would depend on their passion, their enjoyment of it. Someone I really admire recently said, "There's there's good burlesque and there's bad burlesque, but they're both valid."
Yeah,
So it's like even if they're not a certain caliber of performing the best that they possibly could, if they're passionate and enjoying it, they're going to keep doing it and they're going to keep getting booked. So I'm definitely not the best burlesque performer that there is, but I'm nice to be around. I'm on time. I have good etiquette in the dressing room, all
right.
kinds of things that keep me getting booked. And even though I'm not the best in the whole world, but I keep getting jobs because of all these other things.
Yeah.
So if they're passionate and nice and on time and are on top of things, they're going to go far.
Yeah, and that brings us back to the theme of today's show, which is the crossover, the intersection between burlesque and comics, because that's absolutely true of comics as well. In other words, somebody much smarter than me said a while ago that there are three things, just like a Venn diagram for success in comics, and the three circles are being the absolute best at what you do, being able to hold a deadline, and being able to be easy to work with, or and have good people skills. And they said just choose any two intersections and you've got a career in comics, meaning that you don't necessarily have to be the best in the business if you can hold a deadline and you're easy to work with. You can get an awful lot of work just based on kind of having a core competency and holding deadlines and being somebody that is easy to work with. Meanwhile, it also says if you are the best at what you do, you can only screw around in one of those circles. You can be late with deadlines, but you better be really easy to work with, or vice versa, right? So that as soon as you said that, I was listening for the three Venn diagrams because it's
Exactly.
absolutely true. I said the same thing about myself. I'm not necessarily the best cartoonist, right? I feel very good about my skills. I'm very confident. But there are people doing this at a much higher level than I do. However, I will out hustle them every day and twice on Sunday because I have a really good handle on some of those other things that is just as important. And it's wonderful to hear that that happens in your sphere as well.
I think it's very similar because it's art. It's artists putting together kind of like I guess when you're working for other people's shows, you're kind of like freelancing.
Yeah. Although there's one thing that's probably we're gonna diverge. Tell me if I'm wrong, because for me, lettering and dialogue is like king. We at Comic Lab we did a show just a week ago where we said lettering was the first thing we did and the last thing we checked before hitting the publish button. Dialogue, I'm assuming in burlesque, it's more. Is there? As I don't see this being something with a lot of spoken lines, other than maybe an aside or two. Am I right about that?
So yeah, you would be right about that. So mostly what I do is body language.
Yeah.
Uh, but the MC of the show, his script is super important. It needs to be funny and concise, and keep people engaged but also informed.
Right.
So we spend a lot of time. Like he works on it. He's a stand up comedian, so he's very good. Uh,
Yes.
but then I also have input and ideas, and I think I'm hilarious, so he loves my ideas. And
Yeah.
maybe it's just because I'm the boss that he he
You always laugh a
laughs at
little
my
harder
jokes.
at the boss. Yeah, yeah, I understand that. Well, that was a big. Speaking of intersections, that was a lot of the early comedians, especially going back to vaudeville. That was a kind of a core gig that they would have, was going up and emceeing burlesque. I think I have this memory. I've searched for it. I don't think that I've been able to find it. Maybe somebody listening will. But back, this would have been in the 80s. There was an HBO special where Red Skelton kind of came out and did like an HBO burlesque show, because that's how he got his start, was doing MC work as a comedian. So I'm not surprised that somebody with a stand-up comedy background would be very good at this, because not only can they deliver a punchline competently, they can think on their feet when certain things happen, and they've got to improvise or improv or just handle. Oh gosh, you don't get hecklers, do you?
Oh, no, not really. People, some people just want to like be part of the joke. They want to be part of the show. Uh,
Yeah.
but he handles them very well.
That's good to have. That's good to have. Well, Erie, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a fantastic conversation. But this was fantastic. Thank you so much for spending time talking comics and burlesque with me.
Thank you. I definitely want to do it again sometime. I feel like we didn't really talk much about comics. I went on a whole spree there talking about burlesque, but I would love to chat again sometime.
There's a reason for that. It's that you're much more interesting. You have the better stories, because here's the deal. Your stories are like, yeah, I went up there on stage and I tripped and fell and I came back up and I gave him a nod and everything was okay. And my story is, well, I sat in the chair and I drew, and then a little bit later, I'll come home from the studio. My wife says, how was your day? I said, it was amazing. She says, what happened? I said, I sat in a chair and I wrote and I drew comics. She says, well, what else? I said, there was nothing else. It was a great day. I just sat and wrote and draw. So my stories are nowhere near as interesting as your stories. I guarantee it. But next time we come back, maybe we'll get a little bit more into the comic side. But before we go, we'll remind everybody, Crown of Bones coming up in August. There's a big show up in Syracuse, a burlesque show to support this comic. If you're already a Kickstarter backer, you're going to have one on the way. If not, you can buy one at the show. And I'm sure after the show, just knowing Eerie as I do, there'll be a place you can buy it online. I guarantee you. Speaking of people who are top-notch players, Eerie knows what she's doing. So thank you, Eerie, for being on the show, and let's do this again sometime.
Yes, let's do it. Have a great rest of your week.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.